Educational GMAT. Your partner in your GMAT journey.
So explain the argument. Yes, Rushant, go ahead. By the way, what does idle mean? Stopped. Okay. Now, first of all, tell me, does the argument at least hint that when they are stopped, is the ignition still on or off?
On.
Still clearly on, right? Otherwise, it will not make sense at all, right?
Yeah.
So while they've stopped, why have they stopped, by the way?
Because of lesser parking space.
Sorry.
Because lesser
Tour bus,
parking space.
correct. Because tourists have gone out, right? And so obviously the bus has to stop to wait for tourists to come back, right? But for the time that it stopped, clearly the ignition is still on. Sorry. Which is what you need to be a bit louder.
Says
Which is
there has
what
been
is
little
causing the pollution, which is affecting the buildings. Yes. Yeah, Shivang, tell me.
Says that due to lesser parking space, the buses are idle at
Correct.
the curb.
Correct.
The ignition.
And this is all attributed to less parking space.
Yeah.
Right? So because the parking is not available, so they're just waiting on the side, basically at the curb. And since they are waiting at the curb, the ignition is on. Since the ignition is on, there is pollution. Since there is a pollution, the buildings are getting affected. Exactly the opposite. There has been little parking space. Because of the scarcity of parking, the buses are idling at the curb. So in fact, the solution to this is what? What is the solution being proposed? More parking space, right? The city has now provided parking that accommodates a third of the tour buses. So the damage to Peltitos, no, not Peltitos, Pelititos buildings from buses exhaust will diminish significantly. So now I think at least the argument is clear, right? Okay, which of the following strong supports the argument? Tell me what's the conclusion? What's the conclusion of the argument? The less the pollution. All right. In other words, damage to Pelitito's buildings from buses exhaust will diminish significantly as a result of increased parking. That's the conclusion that we have to support. Are we clear? Are we clear? All right. Now think about it. Can you critically think about this? Can you think about this critically? Suppose that, all right, I'm giving you a scenario. In fact, I'm just giving this away to you. Let us say that, now notice anything is possible, right? So there are tour buses and these buses are obviously taking the tourists for a guide of the entire Palitito city, right? So which means obviously along the tour, there is some time for which the buses are traveling. There is some time for which the buses are not traveling, basically waiting for the tourists. Now, the question I have for you is, let's say if 10 hours is the total tour time, all right? If X is the amount of time for which the buses are traveling and Y is the amount of time for which the buses are not traveling, which means waiting for the tourists, which means X plus Y is equal to 10. Agreed? My question is, as far as the effectiveness of the plan goes, would X and Y matter? Would the actual value of X and Y matter? The time for which the bus is traveling versus the time for which the bus is not traveling. It would matter. Very nice. Why would it matter? Absolutely. See, because let us say out of 10 hours, suppose the bus is moving around for 9.5 hours and is waiting for only half an hour. No, on. Waiting, because right now we are talking about there is no off option, right? They are idling at the curb. Correct? So if the bus is waiting for just half an hour and is moving around for 9.5 hours, then would the introduction of more parking space really benefit? Very, very minor. On the other hand, out of this entire 10 hours, if the bus is moving around for 4 hours and is waiting for 6 hours, then will the introduction of parking spaces help? Absolutely, it helps tremendously, because right now the bus is idling with ignition on for 6 hours. So that 6 hours of exhaust is getting prevented if we introduce parking spaces. Do you agree? Right? So as I said, I've already given it to you. So now I think the answer will be easy. Yeah, I thought this was easy now. I think you're not absolutely exact, Charlie. Notice tour buses typically spend less than 1/4 of the time transporting passengers. Absolutely, 1/4 of the time moving, 3/4, 3/4 of the time not moving. So when basically they are idle, right? Charlie says exactly what we discussed, Prashant, right? That 3/4 of the time the buses are just idling, which means obviously the exhaust is being given even when the buses are not moving. So which means substantial amount of time in the bus, in the tour of the bus, is currently being spent in the idle manner. And this obviously generates a lot of exhaust, which we are likely to prevent if we provide suitable parking spaces.
But Ashish, in this case, what is the argument? I thought the argument is that the
Argument is yes.
I thought the argument is that now since the city has provided parking,
Yes, the
the
exhaust will
damage to
diminish.
the buildings will be less. Yeah. So how
Correct.
is C supporting that?
Which is exactly what we're saying. We discussed, Shivang. Out of 10 hours, all right. Now, out of 10 hours, let's say total duration of the tour is 10 hours.
Achha, so
So
Charlie is saying that since because of the new parking, the time spent by the tour buses
it is not
reduced.
because of the new parking. It is not
Yeah.
because, in any case, when the bus goes out for a tour, notice less than 1/4 of the time is spent in transporting the passengers. So, which means out of 10 hours, only 2.5 hours is in transporting the passengers. Rest 7.5 hours, the buses basically stopped. Do you agree? This is what Charlie says.
Yeah.
Now, right now, when the bus is stopped, it is idling at the curb, which means the ignition is off, which means the exhaust is being emitted.
Yeah.
So, which means the bus is now emitting exhaust for 7.5 hours when it does not need to emit the exhaust. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when the parking is provided, the bus will stop there. Stop as in the ignition will be off.
बट वो तो आगे का assumption है ना. Argument is कि the new parking ऐसे ऐसे accommodate कर लेगा pollution को. C is the
No, no, no.
C is
New
explaining
parking.
the reason ना. Charlie is
Sure.
explaining the reason for कि why there is a lot of pollution, how the buildings are being damaged, and the argument says कि when the new parking will be provided, it will accommodate buses, which will reduce the pollution because there will be less of idling.
Shivang, can you please repeat it?
All right. The argument talks about that
So,
because
by
of
the
the
way,
new.
first of all, I think let me first get it clear. By idling, we mean that the bus is stopped and the ignition is on.
Yeah, so the
By
new
park,
argument says,
when it's parking, when it's parked, the
yeah,
ignition will be off. Do you agree with
yeah,
this?
yeah.
Okay, now go ahead.
So the argument basically says that because of the new parking, buses will
Because of
be
the
parked
parking.
with ignition off, because of which
Yes.
there will be less of emission and less of pollution that will harm the
Yes.
building. Right? This is the
Yes.
argument.
Yes. No, this is.
Charlie's
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Charlie says that tour buses they spend very less time in Palito, but the remaining time they just drive around the buildings with ignition on, right? Because of which,
No, 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 no. They don't drive around with ignition on. Whenever they are driving, ignition will be on. We are not talking about that. We are talking about when the bus is stopped.
no, for Charlie, tour buses
Yeah.
typically spend less than one quarter of the time they are in Palitito transporting passengers from one side to another.
Let's take total is 10 hours. All right. According to Charlie, 2.5 hours bus is moving. Agreed. 7.5 hours bus is not moving.
All right.
Okay. Do you agree? So
Yeah.
when bus is moving anyway, there'll be exhaust. So we can't do
Yeah.
anything about it. Now, when the bus is not moving, what are the two choices that we have? No parking,
Yeah.
which is the current state.
Yeah.
All right. Which means ignition is on or off?
No parking on.
On, which means exhaust will be emitted,
Yeah.
significant exhaust. All right. What is the alternative being planned now?
Parking.
Parking. Ignition on
Ignition
or off?
off.
Off. Which means exhaust or no exhaust?
No exhaust.
No exhaust. And that's exactly what Charlie is saying.
Mm,
That there is significant amount of time for which buses are not moving.
yeah.
So obviously, if they are not moving, then even basically they are in an idle state, which means there is significant exhaust. So parking will clearly significantly, notice diminish significantly. So clearly parking will significantly lower the exhaust. On the other hand, and this is the example I gave, on the other hand, Shivang, out of 10 hours, let us say the bus was moving for 9.5 hours, moving, all right,
Yeah.
moving. And let us say the bus was not moving for 0.5 hours, not moving. All right. So again, moving anyway, we can't do anything about. How about not moving? If we have no parking, which is the current state, obviously there will be exhaust because the ignition is on. On the other hand, if there is parking, then obviously the exhaust will be less. But in this particular case, obviously the exhaust will not diminish significantly by providing parking because in any case we are only saving for 1.5 hours of exhaust. While in this particular case, we are saving for 7.5 hours of exhaust.
Okay.
Are we clear? Tell me where's the doubt?